Okay, so I ended the last video talking about United States versus Rhodes, 1866, where they were, as the Supreme Court is still trying to do today, to define what they meant when they wrote the 13th Amendment in the Civil Rights Act. Nobody needed to have it explained to them what a citizen was, what their rights were, or none of that until it was time to give it to the Negro Americans. Everybody understood the law before that. Everybody knew what a citizen was before that. And so, as I move on, and hopefully, this won't be as long a long video because we have this part four. But I wanted to make sure that I went through everything so that we can understand what led up to the writing of the 13th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. It's hard to do that in one setting to help you get a full understanding of what was going on and why they were written and what's going on today. Okay? The fear that the founders had was that America would never reach its goal of being a free and just society. After all of the acts and laws were written to secure the right of citizenship for Negro Americans, the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th Amendment, the Civil Rights Act, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment. Americans had proven that freedom was not the goal. This is proven in a way that state legislators continue to devise ways to strip the Negro of his citizenship and rights. The call to repeal the 14th Amendment began in Congress not long after it was ratified. There were many people trying to come up with reasons why um, the Negro shouldn't have that 14th Amendment right. And one of them was one of the big ones that kind of carried on into the 20th century was this idea that the Negro wasn't human. Now I know that didn't come from the government itself, but the argument was made in Congress. Um, I read about one reason they wanted to appeal it was because the Negro, their voting right was being purchased. So if you are poor, everything's been taken from you and nothing given back, and then someone offer you something just for you to vote for them, money, food, whatever it was, I don't know. But one of the arguments was that people were able to purchase the Negro vote, and they didn't care about that vote. It wasn't doing no good for them. I mean, really. And then that right was stripped away. The right to vote was stripped away until 1968 or 69. So one of the arguments was this book that was written by a guy named Charles Carroll. The book was called The Negro, a Beast. It says this Charles Carroll in distinct, he is distinct from the historical figure with the same name, Senator Charles Carroll of Carlton, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. This is two different people. This other Charles Carroll is just another person. He claimed to be a Bible scholar and I guess a scientist, since he claimed that he knew that the Negro wasn't human. This book is absolutely ridiculous today, but they listened to it back then. It was written in 1900. They sat there and listened to it, and they furthered this information. That means that they started to, like, it was even quasi being taught, sort of being taught in school. Okay. It says the Negro beast, or in the image of God, the reasoner of the age, the revelator of the century, the Bible as it is, the Negro and his relation to the human family, the Negro beast, but created with articulate speech and hands, that he may be of service to his master, the white man. Okay. The Negro not the son of Ham, no. Neither can it be proven by the Bible and the argument of theologians who would claim such. Melts to mist before the thunderous and convincing arguments of this masterful book. This is so funny. Okay. It says by Chaz Carroll, who has spent 15 years of his life. It took him 15 years to figure this out. $20,000 in this compilation, That's a lot of money for the 1900s. Published by the American Book and Bible House. A Bible house? Wow. Okay. I thought you want it to be scientifically proven or some type of proof before a Bible house printed, but no. Entered according to Act of Congress in the year 1900 by Charles Carroll in the office of the Librarian of Congress, Washington D.C. Publisher's announcement. Let's hear what he has to say about his own book. In placing this book entitled "The Negro Beast" or "In the Image of God" upon the American market, we do so know that there will be many learned men who will take issue with this. But while we are fully convinced of this, we are also convinced that when this book is read and its contents duly weighed and considered in an intelligent and prayerful manner, that it will be to the minds of the American people like unto the voice of God from the clouds appealing unto Paul. Wow. Okay. Appealing unto Paul on his way to Damascus. So if you don't know the story, it's, I don't know. I don't really know what it was that Paul experienced, but a light kind of shined in front of him and kind of knocked him over and blinded him. This guy is comparing his book to that. Appealing un, appealing unto Paul on his way to Damascus. We are not bought. We have not bought out this book hurriedly and without due thought and consideration. But on the other hand, we have had the manuscript under advisement for considerable time, and we have read and reread it until the ponderous sledgehammer blows of Professor Carroll rang in our ears, until the clang and ding of his arguments convinced us that it would be a sin before God and man to withhold from the reading public such an array of biblical, scientific, and common sense arguments. We are placing this book before the reading public as a witness to be questioned and cross examined by the world. And if its pages will not stand the righteous attack of criticism, then we are willing for its arguments to be trailed in the dust of oblivion. We ask the reading public to carefully pursue its pages, and if in any particular there can be evidence produced, and if in any particular there can be evidence produced that this book is not founded upon the Bible in toto, T-O-T-O is what it says, and scientifically digested, then we are ready to close our doors, and them doors got closed right there. But, you know, and placed over its portals in burning letters of fire, deluded and misguided by an array of biblical truths scientifically discussed. Okay. So basically, what he's saying is no matter what, his book is the truth, and there's nothing that can make it a lie. We're going to close our doors and place over its portals in burning letters of fire, deluded and misguided by an array of biblical truths scientifically discussed. Moving on. The publisher lists illustrations. Adam and Eve, the morning of creation. Adam and Eve, the morning of the creation of man. Sorry. Is the white man in the image of God? If he is, can the Negro be also? Does like beget like? If so, could white parents beget a Negro child? Was Christ a Negro? If so, God is a Negro, as he is the father of Christ. We're thinking, I ain't gonna even go into that. What the Was the first offspring of Adam and Eve a Negro, or was any of their children Negroes? The beast and the virgin, or the sin of the century. Did nature blunder, or was God mistaken when he said like begets like? God is never mistaken. Will your next child be a Negro? I'm proud to be a Negro. Sir, if you were here, I would tell you that. If the Negro sprung from Adam and Eve, then it may Will your next child be a Negro? If the Negro sprung from Adam and Eve, then it may happen. The egg of creation can you get a duck from a turkey egg or a dove from the egg of a crow? Natural results of amalgamations brought about by treating the Negro as a human being. Natural results of amalgamation brought about by treating the Negro as a human being. We did find out who actually has Neanderthal DNA, and it's not the Negroes. Charles Carroll said his book, is the best description of scientific and biblical evidence of the nature of the Negro. Reading the table of contents is enough to gather the very ignorance of this book. Somebody lied to Mr. Charles about the essence of true science and the true understanding of Scripture. This is the table of contents of this publication. I'm not going to read all of them because they are just too ridiculous for me to even speak here. If you want to read this publication, you can read it free at the Library of Congress online at archive.org. So I just put about three of them in here. It looked like chapter 5, 6, and 10, I think. Convincing biblical and scientific evidence that the Negro is not of the human family. Red, yellow, and brown skin denotes amalgamation of the human family with the beast, the Negro. The Bible and divine revelation, as well as reason, all teach that the Negro is not human. Where this dude relatives at? I wonder if they still around here somewhere. For many years, this country tried to convince the Negro that they descend from monkeys and that they were not human, and because of this, they are not good for anything but slavery. This argument persisted in America for quite some time, with no scientific evidence for any of the findings, all in the effort to deny Negroes their 14th Amendment right. The fact that this ridiculous, unscientific argument was ever allowed to be spoken is an atrocity within itself. Okay, the argument against the 14th Amendment continued down through the years, and still today, I feel that someone has devised a plan to tie it up in legal ridiculousness, and eventually Americans will want it gone, and they will give you what you say you want, without you knowing what you are really giving up. An article by the Southern Poverty Center states that, like other extremists, neo-Confederates are questioning the constitutional amendment that gave blacks citizenship, but the court have consistently rejected their argument. Born from the ashes of the Civil War, the 14th Amendment expanded notions of citizenship to include African Americans by providing that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The amendment has been part This amendment has been part of the United States Constitution since its ratification in 1868. And since then, Confederate sympathizers and other right-wing groups have refused to accept the amendment's legitimacy, calling the 14th Amendment the most nefarious consequence of the Reconstruction. The Neo-Confederate League of the South attacked the validity of the amendment on the grounds that its ratification was fraudulent. You see, if they can't get around giving it back to us, then they would rather not have it at all. So all Americans have to be careful because, like Abraham Lincoln said, and some of the other founders or writers of the Federalist paper, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and who's the other one? My book is falling apart. James Madison. Okay, so they were afraid because people were not following the Constitution that they were writing. They were not following the highest law in the land that brought, that was the reason why everybody came here, for freedom, right? Well, to steal, of course, and then to be free from the encroachments of others. And then they came over here and encroached on others. All right, it said the Neo-Confederates raised an interesting point. The process of ratifying the 14th Amendment did involve strong arm tactics. Southern states were granted re entry into the Union only on the condition that they ratified the amendment. Now, they could have stayed out, they could have stayed independent. They didn't have to rejoin the Union. So, nobody put a gun to their head. Okay. All right. But none of this is surprising. After all, America had just fought the bloodiest war in her history over the issue of slavery, and extending citizenship to newly freed slaves was a vital component of Reconstruction. The United States Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court long ago said that courts were not to enter the political arena to second guess the process by which amendments were ratified. The question of the efficacy of ratifications by legislatures should be regarded as a political question pertaining to the political department, with the ultimate authority in the Congress in the exercise of its control over these words promul- promulgation of the adoption of the amendment. The non-justifiability of a political question is a primary function of the separation of powers. The corners of our entire system of government, a cornerstone of our entire system of government. That's Baker versus Carr, 1962. So each one of these statements is from a different Supreme Court case. The last one was Coleman versus Miller, 1939. The neo-Confederate view of the 14th Amendment is illegitimate. Is shared by other ide- these words in the world of right. Okay, I'm skipping that. The illegitimate 14th Amendment, the Freemen created 14th Amendment citizens consisting of African Americans, Negro Americans, who do not have inalienable rights, but only the limited statutory civil rights that Congress granted them. The 14th Amendment citizens are subject to federal law because their very citizenship emanates from the rights granted by the federal government, whereas the organic sovereigns are not subject to federal law. This is what the Neo Confederates say. Not surprisingly, the courts have not been impressed by such legal gymnastics, where plaintiffs have claimed they do not have to pay federal taxes or as organic sovereigns. The argument has been consistently and thoroughly rejected by every branch of the government for decades. I remember hearing some lectures by black Moors, well, Moors, because that Moors is just black, just saying the same thing, that they were sovereign and that they didn't have to pay taxes and they didn't have to do this, that, whatever. And whenever they tried to do that, they end up in court and go to jail sometimes. So, indeed, advancement of such utterly meritless argument is now the basis for serious sanctions imposed on civil litigants who raised them. United States versus Studley, 1986. The fact that the United States Supreme Court has soundly rejected attacks on the 14th Amendment for more than a century adds to the amendment's legitimacy. It adds to the amendment's legitimacy. That's Lesser versus Garnett in 1922. Courts adhere to the concept of stare decisis, a doctrine that they be this be some Italian, some French, some all kind of stuff in our laws. I don't even know what they be saying. The concept of stare decisis, a doctrine designed to create a secure and certain legal system by requiring courts to abide by or adhere to decided cases. Black Law Dictionary. So basically, once a case has been decided based on a law, then, like I said earlier, everyone is supposed to take that case and use it to render or to make your decision when you're at the Supreme Court on something that is the same. The 14th Amendment was championed by a victorious government as a result of the Civil War. Questioning the amendment at this late date, is tantamount to fighting the war all over again. Having lost on the battlefield, it is no surprise that those who question the amendment's legitimacy have lost in courts. What happens if you repeal the 14th Amendment? It was on the table when it was first written, and it's back on the table again, giving our 14th Amendment right to everyone in the world who wanted it, and has caused another big issue concerning the 14th Amendment. It was never intended for anyone except the Negro American. Everyone else in America at that time was already protected. Now, because of this erroneous oversight of the cause and purpose of the 14th Amendment, we are calling into question the validity of the 14th Amendment. Because birthright citizenship has been given to everyone, that this was not a real law. Sorry. Birthright citizenship had been given to everyone, and that was not a real law. It was more of a de facto law. It was a misinterpretation of the 14th Amendment for nefarious reasons. Between 1851 and 1900, people in many parts of the world, mostly in Europe, decided to leave their homes and immigrate to the United States. Between 1851 and 1900, many came to the U.S. because it was perceived as a land of economic opportunity. Others came seeking personal freedom and relief from political and religious persecution. And nearly 12 million immigrants arrived in the United States between 1870 and 1900. 12 million. The vast majority of these people were from Germany, Ireland, and England. The principal source of immigration before the Civil War. Even so, a relatively large group of Chinese immigrated to the United States between the start of the California Gold Rush in 1849 and 1882, when the federal law stopped their immigration. So after the Kim Wong Ark case, uh, they passed the immigration law to exclude Chinese people. America has allowed, they were probably too dark. America has allowed every immigrant into America with benefits that they would not give to its Negro citizens, essentially putting everyone above the Negro in all areas of Americans' social and economic status, allowing them to discriminate against their Negro citizens with impunity. Most of these people came to the United States after all of the wars were fought, and they were given the same benefits as Americans who had just finished fighting a bloody civil war. The Immigration Act of 1924 proves that immigration and birthright citizenship were never the same, that somehow over the process of time, immigration is now being called birthright citizenship. The Immigration Act of 1924 limited the number of immigrants allowed entry into the United States through a national origins quota. The quota provided immigration visas to 2% of the total number of people in each nationality in the United States as of the 1890 national census. It completely excluded immigrants from Asia. In 1917, the U.S. Congress enacted the first widely restrictive immigration law. The uncertainty generated over national security during World that's a tongue twister for me. World War One made it possible for Congress to pass this act, and it included several important provisions that paved the way for the 1924 Act. The 1917 Act implemented a literacy test that required immigrants over 16 years old to demonstrate basic reading comprehension, comprehension in any language. It also increased the tax paid by new immigrants upon arrival and allowed immigration officials to exercise more discretion in making decisions over whom to exclude. Finally, the Act excluded from entry anyone born in the geographically defined Asiatic barred zone, except for Japanese and Filipinos. In 1907, the Japanese government had voluntarily limited Japanese immigration to the U.S. in the Gentleman's Agreement. The Philippines was an American colony, so its citizens were American nationals and could travel freely to the United States. China was not included in the barred zone, but the Chinese were already denied immigration visas under the Chinese Exclusion Act. Okay, let's move it on down. Okay, right. The Supreme Court is requesting responses from states and groups challenging President Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship. Okay, he's ending something that is not a law. All immigrants have rights under the Immigration Acts. All of them. The only people that has been fighting for their rights ever since everybody got here are the Negroes. And so there's no need for birthright citizenship. Like that don't make any sense. That don't make any sense. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. You can decide for yourself whether you think that makes sense or not. Um, so let me read this. Let me go back up a little bit. It's all okay. The global depression of the 1930s and World War II both served as curtail European immigration with the E coming from Europe. When these crises had passed, emergency provisions for the resettlement of displaced persons in 1948 and 1950 helped the United States avoid conflict over its new immigration laws. In all of its parts, the most basic purpose of the 1924 Immigration Act was to preserve the ideal of American homoge- homogeneity. Congress revised the act in 1952. These constant reorganizing of the understanding and processes of immigration has been, in my humble opinion, to maintain the majority rule status. So they had to continue manipulating the immigration policies so that it worked in favor of the white majority. The Supreme Court is requesting responses from states and groups challenging President Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship. About 2 dozen states have sued over the order. They argue it violates the 14th Amendment, which states that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are American citizens. It does say all persons born or naturalized are citizens, but they have to be born under the jurisdiction of the United States. Okay. South Carolina is one of the 18 states that joined the Supreme Court's brief supporting brief supporting the executive order. State State's Attorney General Alan Wilson says he disagrees with the way the amendment has been interpreted by those wanting to block Trump's order. The amendment was rightfully designed to bestow citizenship on emancipated slaves, which need which needed to happen, but it has been misinterpreted over the last 160 years to incentivize the ridiculous notion that somebody can come to the United States in the dead of night, drop a child like a boat drops an anchor, and all of a sudden they have been bestowed citizenship for henceforth forevermore, Wilson said. That was not the intention of the framers of the 14th Amendment, he added. Wilson also noted that he believes the nation's highest court could rule in their favor. This was an article by the Associated Press. Okay, so now we know I'm not getting in that argument. I'm not saying that I agree with anything about Donald Trump or anything about any Trump or any Democrat or Republican. But what I'm saying is birthright citizenship should never have been attached to the 14th Amendment. And now that it has been, now the attack is on the 14th Amendment, which takes us back to we don't want to give these Negroes their citizenship rights, their 14th Amendment rights. Now, like I said earlier, it's in my humble opinion that if we don't have constitutionality, no one does. And so it only looks like other people have rights. They're given privileges and immunities to make them seem like that they are free. But freedom came with the 13th, 14th, and 15th